Good morning, guys. Happy Friday. Hopefully, you guys had a good week. 2 weeks down into our online learning. Hopefully, it's coming smoother. I think it is becoming a little bit more smooth for you guys because I'm getting less messages from you guys throughout the day. So that's positive. But yeah, so today I did something. I left the hidden camera yesterday in my jungle, and I just wanted to share with some of the footage that I found from the jungle. Here we go. So in my jungle, we have Legos. We have a snail, a bee that wants to come in. We have some ants carrying strawberries, honey nut Cheerios, leaves. We have some mushrooms that look like ladybugs, and we have another ladybug. We have a huge apple with a nice little butterfly on top, and a baby snake. Not a worm, but a snake. And I think that's everything that I caught in my little jungle. So yeah, pretty interesting. So if any of you guys want some extra credit, you guys are more than welcome to come over to my house and cut down the grass or do whatever you want. I know Alonso and Santi already volunteered, but if anybody else wants to come down and mow the lawn, you're more than welcome to, and I'll give you extra credit. But anywho, let's go on and get into the lessons for today. Alrighty, so yesterday we talked about the Athens Society. First off, only a few of you guys watched the whole video because you guys left a comment in the YouTube video, so you guys all get extra credit. I believe it was Josie, Edwin, Emily, America, Yvette, and I don't know if I'm missing anybody else, but I think those are the people off the top of my head. So thank you guys for following all directions. So yeah, we talked about the Athenian society, how they were completely different than the Spartans. The Spartans favored the military, and the Athenians, they didn't favor military. They did have a military, but they focused mainly on learning, and they focused on expanding their mind and being educated. But unfortunately, education was only used for the wealthy, and only the really wealthy people could be educated. The boys were educated. If they were wealthy, they had tutors to come and tutor them, and they were just getting them ready to participate in government and the assemblies and all that. Women, on the other hand, had no rights whatsoever. Um, their whole job was to stay home. They couldn't leave the house, and they had to just sew and weave all day long. And they believed that that was the only thing that the women need to do. Education was not important for the women. So I believe a lot of you guys said you'd rather be a Spartan because of the military and because they had more freedoms, which is a good choice. So today we are going to talk about a war that the Spartans and Athens got into, and we are going to see why this war happened, who's going to win, who's going to come out victorious, and yeah, so let's get into it. But first, let's review. Number one, why did girls in Athens receive little education? People in Athens, the girls in Athens, or the society of Athens, believed that girls did not need education. They thought that the only job that the girls need to do was to stay home, cook, take care of the kids, take care of the house, sew, and make clothes. Number two, what was the basic difference between life in Sparta and life in Athens? The major difference was Spartans focused heavily on military, and life in Athens, they focused mainly on learning and expanding their mind and becoming educated. The roles of the men and women in Athens. So the men, they did serve in the military, but only for 2 years, and the rest of the time they were pretty much learning. Unless you were poor. If you were poor, you became a farmer and you were making, growing crops and getting food for the rest of the people. If you're a woman in Athens, you pretty much stayed home all day, kind of like what we are doing now in quarantine, and you just sewed, took care of the house, and that's pretty much it. You had no freedom. So if you're rich, you had a good life. If you're poor, not so much. That was the life in Athens. All right, so today we are going to talk about this thing called the Peloponnesian War, the war between Sparta and the war between Athens. So this is pretty much the battle for Greece. So we'll go ahead and get into it now. So as we talked about before, Sparta and Athens, they actually worked together to win the Persian Wars. And they were using each other because they both realized that they're both from Greece and we should help defend each other. But however, most of the Spartans were land fighters and the people in Athens were sea fighters. And this was a huge difference. And when Athens, or by the end, since Athens was like a bigger area, they had a huge influence over Greece. Okay? So after the Persian Wars ended in 480 BC, many of these city states around Greece, they started to join together as an alliance to use each other as protection. And the Athenian government was going around asking all these city states to join this thing, join this alliance, and we'll all look after each other and protect each other. This alliance that they created was called the Delian League. And the reason why they called it the Delian League is because of a city called Delios. And that's where most of them were staying and everything like that. So they're using each other to protect each other for trade, and they're protecting each other in the Aegean Sea. One thing that was happening was that the Athenians, they made every single city-state pay for protection. So everyone would pretty much put in their part. They would pay like a tax, and this tax guaranteed that everyone was going to protect each other. Unfortunately, the Athenians, since they were so powerful, they started to collect all this money and they started to forget what the Delian League was really about. They started to use the Delian League as a way to start building their empire. With all this money that they were getting, they decided, we can use this money to build our empire. And when the Athenians started to do this, they started to treat the other city-states like their subjects, like if they worked for them, bossing them around, treating them unfairly, not really doing things. And Athens was taking advantage of this power that they were gaining and all the money that they were getting from these alliances. Eventually, some of these Athenian rulers, they even used the league's money to beautify the city of Athens. They would build huge buildings, bring in art, build temples, and pretty much what they were doing was building this empire for themselves and really not thinking about everybody else, because they just thought, everything will be good if we all work together and protect each other. It's okay if we take a little bit of the money from the pot and beautify our city. But the Delian League was not the only alliance in Greece. So after the Persian Wars, many of the southern Greece cities, including Sparta, they also banded together. And they bounded together and they formed this alliance, and they called this alliance the Peloponnesian League. And they called it after their peninsula of all the city-states, and that's where it was. That was just like what they call themselves, the Peloponnesian League. So what was going on was, as they saw Athens getting power and becoming and building this empire, not even an alliance anymore, they were building an empire. The Peloponnesian League, they started to get worried that Athenians would get too much power and they would try to come and take them over. So rather wait for them, they decided, let's go ahead and let's just go up to Athens and let's try to stop this spread of their empire and take them to war. And that's exactly what they did. Sparta went up and they declared war on Athens, and this became known as the Peloponnesian War, and it was just this war between Athens and Sparta. But this was horrible because it was almost like a civil war, because this war was going to tear apart all of Greece. Greece was happily working together during the Persian Wars, and now with this Peloponnesian War, it was pretty much going to split them right down in half and make people choose sides. So in 431 BC, a Spartan army, they marched north to Athens and they surrounded the city, waiting for the Athenians to come out and fight. But the Athenians, they stayed in their city. They stayed home and they just hibernated. And they were hoping that the Spartans would eventually leave. So instead, since the Spartans had no one to fight, what they started to do was they started to burn down all the crops and all the food lands around Athens. And they hoped that Athens would run out of food and be forced to surrender. The Spartans, however, were in for a huge surprise. While they were waiting there, they didn't realize that on the backside, the Athenian navy was bringing in merchant ships, they were bringing in food, and they had like this back door. So business was going as usual inside of Athens, even though Sparta was burning down all the crops. It's because they had this merchants and they had these traders going in the backside, and they didn't realize that. While they were doing this, the Navy also attacked Spartans' allies. So all the people that were in the Spartan the alliance, they started to attack them. And during this time, they started to defeat some of these areas. And then something happened that was unfortunate. The there was this huge disease that swept through Athens, killing thousands and thousands of people, not only Athenians, but also Spartans and people from the alliances. So for 10 years, neither sides could really get an advantage over each other, and eventually they had to agree to a truce. So they came to a peace agreement. A few years later, though, in 1415, Athens tried to expand its empire once again. They got more money, they started to get greedy. They actually sent an army and a navy to conquer this island of Sicily, which is located in Italy. But unfortunately, this effort backfired on them. The entire Athenian army was defeated by the Sicilian allies, who was part of the Sparta, or the island of Sicily was part of the Peloponnesian League. And they actually got defeated, and they destroyed nearly almost all of the Athenians' navy. So taking advantage of Athens' weaknesses, Sparta began to attack Athens. They began to do full-on attacks on the city. And although the Athenians fought bravely, the Spartans eventually won. They were able to win by cutting off the food supply from Athens. And the people of Athens began to starve. They began to become desperate, and eventually they surrendered to Sparta. So in the end, the Spartans actually won this battle for Greece, and they gained full control of Greece at the time. So this is why some of the major mascots that we see in today's sports or in colleges are the Spartans. Actually, the high school I went to, the Sure High School, is actually the Spartans as well. So after the war, and after the Spartans defeated Athens, Sparta became the most powerful city-state in Greece. For about 30 years, the Spartans controlled nearly all of Greece, until other city-states started to go and resent them. They started to go against them. They didn't really like it. This resentment started to lead into a period of war. So just like these plugs right now, they're all trying to fight for power. And who's going to win? We didn't know, because everyone was fighting each other. So during this time, the power in Athens, or the power of Greece, was going from one city-state to another city-state to another city-state, and this fighting went on for many, many years. And what happened was they were pretty much destroying their own country of Greece, and they weakened Greece so much that it just left open an opportunity for other people to come and try to take over Greece, which we'll get into next week. So as a quick review, after the Persian Wars, Athens and Sparta, they were friends, but then they started to turn on each other. Athens and other city-states created their own alliance called the Delian League, where they were going to protect each other. But Athens, they started to tax everybody to get this money to use for protection. But Athens started to treat this like an empire, and they started to take advantage of their alliances and their allies, and they started to beautify their city and everything like that. Sparta, on the other hand, they created their own little league and alliance with other states, and they were known as the Peloponnesian League. And they wanted to stop the expansion of Athens because they thought this was getting out of hand, and they were just trying to build an empire. The first attack Sparta took on Athens was a failure because they didn't realize that Athens had all these merchant ships coming in and supplying them with goods, and nothing really happened, even though they burned down all the food. So that stopped. 10 years later, Athens was expanding, and Sparta decided, you know what, I think we should go ahead and attack them again. But this time, Athens came to Sparta. They actually attacked this island called Sicily, which was an alliance of Sparta. And the Sicilians, they were able to defeat the Athenians. They destroyed their navy, and eventually Sparta went into Athens and cut off all their food supply, cut off all the merchant ships, and Athens had to surrender to Sparta. So at this time, Sparta became the most powerful city-state and ruled all of Greece. But during this time, Sparta became big, and people started to resent how the Spartans were doing things. And they started a bunch of little mini wars and civil wars within Greece, which eventually weakened Greece so much that it's going to lead Greece into being in a vulnerable area where other countries or other empires are going to come and take them over. So for homework, I want you guys to answer these 3 questions. Number 1, what happened after the Peloponnesian War? So what happened after these wars with Sparta and Athens? Number 2, why did many city-states form alliances against Athens? Why do they want to go against Athens? Number 3, explain the cause and the effect of the Peloponnesian War. So what caused this war? And then after the war, what were the results of the war? So those are your questions for the weekend. So today we talked about the war between the Spartans and the Athenians. If you have any questions, feel free to message me, leave me a comment. But other than that, have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys all on Monday.